Dear Hollywood, why do you keep making movies that make it seem like you're completely out of ideas when this man exists? Existed. He's dead now. Luther Hayden Dummy Taylor was a major league pitcher from 1900 to 1908, and he was deaf. That's why they called him Dummy. I hope you feel like a butthead if you were laughing. They called all deaf players dummy back then because the actual official term for somebody who was deaf and could not speak was deaf and dumb. Oh, but don't worry. He clowned on everybody so hard they learned sign language just so they could avoid being embarrassed by him. Absolute legend, this guy. No joke, Taylor dunked on this umpire so much and so effectively that the guy spent a week learning sign language just so he could toss him out of a game. He said, "Listen, smart guy, I've spent all my spare time this week learning your language. You can't call me a blind bat anymore. Now go take a shower. You're out of the game." He communicated on the field with his teammates in sign language, and he and another deaf player, Dummy Hoy, were actually credited with the popularization of signs and signals on the baseball field. 1900, he started playing for the New York Giants, and in his first game, some Boston players were trying to take advantage of his deafness by stealing bases while he was pitching. But he said, "I nailed each one. I walked over to Long, the last man caught, and let him know by signs I could hear him stealing." He then went to the Cleveland Broncos in 1902, but being at Cleveland sucked because none of his players knew sign language. He was really outgoing, and so he was just freaking miserable. So the Giants manager sent one of his friends to a Cleveland game that Taylor was pitching, and the guy sat in the stands and with sign language negotiated salary. Taylor said yes and went with him that night back to the Giants. The managers all learned sign language to be able to communicate with him, and so did the team members. Later, one of his teammates recounted that they could all speak sign language because Dummy Taylor took it as an affront if you didn't learn to converse with him. He wanted to be one of us, to be a full-fledged member of the team, so we all learned. We practiced all the time. So they didn't have lights in stadiums back then, so night games didn't really happen until like the 1930s. And there was one game where it was getting dark, but the umpire hadn't called the game yet. So Taylor ran back to the clubhouse and came back out wearing a fireman's oilskin, carrying a lit lantern above his head. And so the ump is yelling at him to get off the field, but Taylor can't hear, so he just keeps going until finally the ump just called the game. Antics aside, Luther Taylor became a hero to the deaf community. An article back then says, "Wherever Taylor goes, he will always be visited by scores of the silent fraternity among whom he is regarded as a prodigy." I mentioned Dummy Hoy, who was another deaf player for Cincinnati. In 1902, the two of them played against each other, which was reported to be the first and only time that that has ever happened. And when Hoy came up to bat for the first time, he signed to Taylor, "I'm glad to see you." I'm not crying, shut up. After retiring from baseball, he went to go teach at multiple schools for the deaf, including Kansas, Iowa, and Jacksonville. Oh, I'm wearing my Iowa shirt. I'm wearing my Iowa shirt today. I promise it says Iowa and not Awoy. He also worked as an umpire, which he said was great because he couldn't hear all the fans and players giving him shit. In 1927, a newspaper ran an article that said he had died. He had not. And so he wrote a letter explaining, and then they ran the news story that Dummy Taylor denies being dead. He passed away in 1958, and he was the last surviving member of the 1905 world champion New York Giants.